Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. So, let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 10 important articles arranged into 6 important topics. If you look at topic number 3, trade wars and trade deals, there are 4 to 5 articles in today's newspaper, which I'm going to club into one comprehensive discussion. Other than that, we have some very interesting and very informative articles which can be relevant for our prelims and mains exam. So let's cover the newspaper in a complete, detailed manner so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you guys are benefiting from this initiative, do support us with your likes and comments. Share this video with other aspirants and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Now, before I start, I have an important announcement. If you're looking for the best coaching guidance for your IAS preparation, then Unacademy is a one stop destination for you. Right now, you have a great opportunity to enroll for our online classroom program at a discounted price. Unacademy is providing a flat 60% off on the courses, and I'm stressing on this offer because the offer ends today. Today is the last day of this offer. You also get a 12-month free extension on the course. This will give you access to all the live classes and the recorded lectures, along with the study material, the test series, doubt resolution sessions, and mentorship sessions. Now, to avail this offer, all you have to do is to enter the code IAS English on the subscription page. For those interested, click on the link provided in the video description. And to avail the offer, you have to enter the code IAS English. Now, before I start, let me remind you to access the PDF of this class, you will have to join my Telegram channel. Scan the QR code on the screen, join the Telegram channel. After the session ends, I'll be sharing this PDF with all of you. So let's begin with today's discussion by looking at this interesting editorial on page number 8. Recently, there was a breaking news that a US based biotech company, which goes by the name Colossal Biosciences, it claimed to have resurrected the dire wolf, which is a long extinct species. These 3 wolf pups were born, named as Romulus, Remus, and Khaleesi, after the popular Game of Thrones character. I'm sure many of you would recognize these dire wolf looking animals with the fictional animals that were depicted in the Game of Thrones series as well. In fact, these wolves were pretty central to the very plot of Game of Thrones. Now, this claim by this biotech company, which is based out of the United States, it created a shock wave across the science and tech industry. And in fact, it has hit global headlines. Now, let's verify the claims of this company. How true are these claims? Has this company really resurrected a extinct species of wolf? And what are the implications? What was the objective behind this scientific program? How was it done? How was it achieved? That is something we need to break down and understand. So to discuss this article, I would like to go beyond the editorial because the editorial gives us very limited information. So I would expand this discussion and make it a very comprehensive analysis because we will be talking about the topic of de-extinction. What is de-extinction? De-extinction is a scientific effort led through genetic engineering using advanced genetic tools to bring back the extinct species of animals. This American biotech company, Colossal Biosciences, it is headed by a well-known genetist, George Church. You can see him in the image over here. Looks a little similar to a supervillain, maybe from Mission Impossible series, but it is Dr. George Church who has contributed to this field, who leads this company as well, based on his experience at the Harvard Medical School and MIT. And he's actually quite well renowned as well. So, the main stated objective of this company is to bring back these extinct species, not just the dire wolves, but as well as the mammoths, which went extinct during the Ice Age. The company is also working on bringing back the dodo, which is an extinct bird species, as well as the Tasmanian tiger. So, like this, Colossal Biosciences, an American biotech company, it is working on cutting edge genetic engineering using a gene editing tool that all of you know, which is CRISPR. CRISPR is a revolutionary gene editing tool through which you can make precise cuts in the genomic sequence, introduce desired traits in the genomic sequence to achieve the desired results. CRISPR technology in itself has been quite controversial, though it can be very beneficial and advantageous to bring out the right kind of crops with high productivity and bring out a revolution in the field of health and medicine to even prevent certain diseases. At the same time, it has number of risks, number of concerns, ethical concerns associated with it. Because such a gene editing tool, which almost acts like a genetic scissor, could be easily misused, where humans will end up playing God, meddle with the natural genetics. And there is a concern that someday this technology could even result in the production of designer babies. In fact, a few years ago, there was a big controversy when a Chinese scientist claimed to have produced human babies with desirable qualities using CRISPR Cas9 gene editing tools. Though the claims were not proven entirely, it did raise the concern about how specific traits can be chosen, specific traits can be cut out to produce designer babies. So there are many ethical concerns associated with such gene editing technology. So this American biotech company, Colossal Biosciences, is pioneering research in genetic engineering using CRISPR to work on this mega de-extinction project to bring back and revive and resurrect the extinct species which went extinct thousands and thousands of years ago. The dire wolves, they last walked on Earth around 10 to 13,000 years ago. At one point, they dominated Canada, United States, etc. But they eventually went extinct. So now this company has claimed that it has been able to give birth to three direwolf pups. But again, the company has issued a disclaimer as well. The company has stated that these three pups, which have been publicized, they're not exactly direwolves. They are just a functional copy of something that used to be alive. The descendants of dire wolves are the gray wolves that we have today, which can be widely found in US and Canada. So by essentially taking the DNA from the dire wolf fossils which were discovered and by blending it with the genetic sequence of the gray wolves which are currently found, this hybrid byproduct has been produced by this company. So please understand, don't get misled by the sensational influencers, educators, and news personalities who have wrongly claimed that dire wolves have actually been resurrected. No, that's not the case. The company, to be fair to Colossal Biosciences, even the company has issued a disclaimer stating these are only functional copies. They look something similar, slightly similar to the dire wolves, but 99% of these pups are essentially grey wolves. Most of the DNA in it comes from the current grey wolf species. Only some genetic code from the DNA obtained from the fossils of dire wolves has been introduced. So these are functional copies of the dire wolves that existed at one point. So this is not exactly a resurrection. And also it requires further scientific studies and peer review to verify the claims and the veracity of what this company is claiming. But based on this de-extinction project, which has gained a lot of global popularity since few years, this company led by Dr. George Church has raised millions and millions of dollars in funding. Just for the mammoth de-extinction project, the company has received up to 150 to 200 million dollars in funding. Similarly, for the direwolf project, the dodo project, and the Tasmanian tiger project, the company has been able to raise millions of dollars in funding, and the company is valued at several billion dollars today. So this raises some crucial questions. Why is the company doing this? Is this business model profitable? What is the end objective, the end goal of this project? What will you do by reviving and resurrecting extinct species and bringing them back? But before we understand that, let's discuss how Colossal Biosciences is working on the de-extinction project. What is the technical approach which is being adopted here. Now, if you look at the mammoth de-extinction project, or be it the dire wolf de-extinction project, which is in the news, this company, as I told you, has essentially extracted DNA from the fossils which have been found. At one point, mammoths, they walked across the tundra region during the ice ages. Today, the descendants of the mammoths are the elephants, the African and Asiatic elephants that we have. The woolly mammoth, whose fossils have been discovered, will obviously contain some of the DNA which has been extracted by this company. And the company is going to use this DNA and the genetic sequence obtained through this to merge that with the genetic code of the existing elephants, the Asiatic and African elephants. It will use this to engineer an egg which will be stimulated into an embryo, which would then be implanted into a surrogate elephant mother. The company is also purportedly working on an artificial womb where these embryos can be essentially cultivated. But eventually, the goal of this company is to use the existing animals like the elephants, the grey wolves, and use them as surrogates to plant the embryo and bring out these extinct species. In the case of the dire wolves, that's what has been done. The company engineered these embryos by adding around 20 edits to the grey wolf genetic sequence. These 20 edits were based on the DNA obtained from the dire wolf fossils. So only around 20 traits of the dire wolf has been added into the existing grey wolf population into the sequence, and then a grey wolf surrogate was used to birth these three pups. So this is the approach that the company is adopting. It essentially takes skin cells, programs them into stem cells, introduces the desired traits, the genetic traits, sequence by sequence, and then the embryo, which contains some of these traits, will be able to give birth to a functional copy of that animal. If not the exact copy of the extinct animal, at least a functional copy with some traits of the extinct species will come out. So, if this is repeated again and again with more and more edits, eventually it is technically possible to resurrect the dire wolves or the mammoths or the dodo, etc. But what is the objective here? What will we gain by resurrecting extinct species? Why is the company working on this project in the first place? Why are investors putting so much money into this project? Right? Obviously, it raises questions. Why are investors pumping millions of dollars into this research project? What could be the end goal? The company claims that de extinction of certain species will help us in combating climate change. Please understand this. You need to know how de extinction can help in climate change. Now, you take the mammoth, for example. As I told you, the woolly mammoths were primarily found in the tundra region, in the alpine, icy climate of the tundra region during the ice age, during the Pleistocene ice ages, which is easily more than 5,000 years ago. Now, these woolly mammoths played a critical role in not just the local ecosystem, but in also regulating the climate and the climatic conditions of the region. The woolly mammoths, they essentially roamed the tundra grasslands. Today, the ice sheets that you see in the tundra belt was at one point dominated by grasslands. And I hope you know that grass, which dominates the tundra region in that era, in the ice age era, it has the ability to tackle global warming. How? It can protect the permafrost layer from heating up. Grass happens to be a good insulating agent of sorts, and the grassland which was present was helping the permafrost to remain permanently frozen, and lot of greenhouse gases, especially methane, was locked up in the permafrost. But as the mammoths went extinct, along with other large species which were present in the tundra region, the grassland eventually went extinct as well, got replaced by shrubs and sheets of snow, which we see today. At one point in the tundra belt, in the grasslands present here, along with woolly mammoths, we had many other large animals which were adapted to these unique harsh conditions, such as the dire wolves, the bisons, cave lions, etc. So the company's objective is to try and bring back these animals in the hope that it will help restore that grassland ecosystem so that we can protect the permafrost layer. See, now what has happened because of the absence of the grassland, permafrost has been exposed to the higher temperatures, and melting snow will essentially release all the methane, which is much more deadly than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. I hope you know that methane has much higher global warming potential, many times higher global warming potential as compared to carbon dioxide. So, this is the end goal of de extinction. The idea is to bring back some of these species to try and restore those ancient ecosystems in the hope that we can tackle global warming. But will this project really work? Does the project deserve such attention and focus? And is it not a waste of the investments? Because there are many other pressing challenges. And doesn't a de extinction project raise ethical questions, moral dilemmas? That is what the editorial is focusing upon. Editorial is raising questions on the claims made by the company itself. Because, as I said, these claims have to be peer verified by other scientists, by independent institutions and organizations. It has to pass the rigorous peer review. As I said, these dire wolves, the images that you are seeing across media, they're not exactly dire wolves as it is being claimed by some. It's just a functional copy with some traits of dire wolf. That doesn't make it a dire wolf. That doesn't make it a resurrection of the dire wolf. It's basically a weird looking grey wolf. As simple as that. The current grey wolf has been turned into a strange looking grey wolf with some 20 characteristics added from the dire wolf. And also, the overall viability of the project. See, even if, let's say, this company succeeds, there is no doubt that this is a tremendous scientific achievement. You can't undermine the scientific achievement. Definitely, it highlights the potential of genetic sciences. But please understand, long term results would take centuries. At least 100 to 150 years of effort would be needed to see anything practical on the ground. And more importantly, these are speculative projects. The question is, why are we spending millions and millions of dollars on a de extinction project which may not even actually give us the desired results? Instead, let us focus on existing species which are actually going extinct. Take the elephants, they are endangered. They are being driven towards extinction because of habitat loss, because of human encroachment. So, conservation funds might get diverted towards the wrong project. Instead of focusing on conserving the existing species, we might end up draining millions of dollars on speculative projects which may not even yield results. Even if they give results, it will be in the long term over 100 to 150 years. So that is the question being raised here. And also, don't forget the ethics of such a project. Doesn't this raise ethical dilemma? Aren't we interfering with the natural evolutionary process? When the Chinese scientists claimed to have genetically edited human babies and produced designer babies, that itself triggered a huge uproar. So, this raises important questions. The scientific community, the governments around the world, the global community has to place certain restrictions on the usage of such critical technologies. See, technology can be revolutionary. Technology can be a great leveler. It can level differences, create a level playing field. It can transform human lives. At the same time, the same technology in the wrong hands can be a dangerous weapon. So, it's very important to strictly regulate such technologies and ensure that there are certain curbs. The ethical dimension has to be brought in when it comes to genetic engineering, which appears to be missing in projects such as the de extinction project. So, this is what you need to be aware of with regard to this breaking news. UPSC can definitely focus on this. We have got questions on CRISPR Cas9 in previous exams. We have got questions on genetic modification before in prelims and mains. So, definitely UPSC can ask a question on the controversial CRISPR technology and its applications, the de extinction project, the controversy surrounding the resurrection of these extinct species. So, this can be an important topic for our exams for science and technology and environment and ecology. So, take up this practice question. Try to write an answer based on what we have discussed, and please post your answers in the comments. I would like to take a look at the answers that you're going to write. Now, before I take up the next article, I have another important announcement. On April 13th, that is tomorrow, on Sunday, Unacademy will be conducting India's biggest civil services championship test. It's a scholarship test which gives you an opportunity to attempt full length papers. You can attempt a full length GS paper and a CSAT paper, and you stand a chance to win up to 100% scholarship on our IAS courses. Along with that, you can even win attractive rewards, including IPL box tickets and other attractive gadgets. Those interested, register by using the link provided in the video description. Now, let's look at the next article. We have a very insightful column on page number 8. This article is related to social issues and governance, and it focuses on the link between climate action and gender equality. Now, some of you might be wondering, how is climate related to gender? What is the connection over here? So, that is what we are here to understand. We'll break down this article, go beyond the article as well, and let's see what the writer is trying to highlight in this insightful article. See, India recently submitted a report. India brought out the Beijing India Report. What is the Beijing India Report? It is a report by India on its performance with regard to ensuring gender equality as per the commitments that were made under the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. This was a global effort, a global initiative launched 30 years ago, 3 decades ago, in the year 1995, under the leadership of United Nations and UN Women. Under the leadership of UN Women, which is a UN organization. So, through the United Nations, the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action was adopted in 1995, and India was a participant. India was an active participant in this Beijing Conference on Women, which brought out the Beijing Declaration. So, the Beijing Declaration Platform for Action identified 12 important dimensions, or rather, 12 important concerns which affect women around the world. 12 critical concerns affecting women and gender equality were identified. And you can see those 12 concerns in this infographic that I have added on your screen. The Beijing Declaration committed the countries to focus on these concern areas. This includes women education, women healthcare, women nutrition, women's participation in politics, women's representation, and women's participation in the economy. For example, concern about education, lack of participation of women in education, poverty and women, women's participation in decision making, women's role in holding on to key powerful positions in politics, women's representation in parliaments, institutional mechanisms for the advancement of women. Because women happen to be a disadvantaged gender, particularly in patriarchal societies, in orthodox societies. Women are treated as a disadvantaged gender, oppressed, discriminated, and they are even at the receiving end of violence in a male dominated society. So, ensuring the safety of women, protecting women from domestic violence, protecting women from sexual exploitation, rapes, protecting women in armed conflict zones, especially in conflict zones. Rape and sexual violence is used as a weapon of war, targeting women and even the girl child. So, all these concerns were identified. Women in media, women in environment, human rights of women. These 12 priorities were identified, and accordingly, countries started working on these goals. They started bringing out special laws, policies, and schemes to fulfill their commitments made under Beijing Declaration Platform for Action. So, India has been firmly committed to these goals, and over the last 30 years, India has made significant progress with regard to gender equality. For example, inspired by the goals and concerns highlighted through the Beijing Declaration, we brought out laws to prohibit domestic violence against women. I hope you know we have a dedicated law that prohibits domestic violence against women. We have dedicated laws to protect women from rapes and sexual molestation. The POSH Act, which focuses on prevention of sexual harassment at workplace, also takes inspiration from the Beijing Declaration. We have special initiatives for women education, women healthcare. Take, for example, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao Andolan. Or take, for example, the Janani Suraksha Yojana or the Pradhan Mantri Matritva Sahyog Yojana. There are specific programs focused on maternal health, infant healthcare to reduce our maternal mortality and infant mortality rates. We have special education schemes encouraging the girl child to get enrolled and remain in the schooling system. So many such initiatives have been taken by India, which are in line with the commitments we have made under the Beijing Declaration. So every now and then we bring out a report on this, which is called the Beijing India Report. In 2019 as well, India submitted the Beijing India Report, marking the 25 years of its implementation. So now we are marking the 30th anniversary of Beijing Declaration. So India has submitted the latest edition of the Beijing India Report, which highlights India's progress. All right. So this is very important for prelims as well. There could be a prelims question on Beijing Declaration and platform for action. There could be a question on the 12 concerns which are flagged under the Beijing Declaration, or a basic question on Beijing India Report. Now, the writer is focused on one aspect of this report. There is one aspect where women and the impact of climate change on women should have been highlighted. But the government has failed to do that. The impact of climate change on women and the need for a gendered perspective with regard to climate action has been entirely left out in this report by the government of India. Is that clear? I'll repeat this point. The concern being brought out by the writer in this column is that in this report, where India is talking about its achievements in achieving gender equality, in fulfilling the commitments of Beijing Declaration, there is one shortcoming. What is the shortcoming? We have not brought out or included a gendered perspective, a women led perspective for climate change and climate action. Why is this important? Why is it necessary? It is very important because climate change has a disproportionate impact on women. Existing inequalities, existing vulnerabilities can get aggravated because of climate change and global warming. So it's very important to understand how climate change can actually affect gender equality, how it can disproportionately affect women. That is something we need to learn through this article. So let me make it more illustrative by bringing some good examples, because there can be a essay on this as well, a essay topic on climate change and its disproportionate impact on women. Why it is necessary to have a gendered view, a gendered perspective when we focus on climate action. Because whenever we talk about climate action, we only think about renewable energy or decarbonizing the economy. There isn't much attention when it comes to the weaker sections and vulnerable sections, and women fall under that category. Studies have clearly established that women face the disproportionate impact of climate change and global warming. So it's important that in our policies, in our laws, in various schemes focused on climate action, we need to incorporate a gendered perspective, give a dedicated focus and attention for protection of women, ensuring gender equality while we deal with climate change. So let's understand the disproportionate impact through some examples, through some real world examples. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, just 6% of climate policies around the world mention women. That shows the lack of focus and attention on women as a vulnerable category when it comes to climate action. Is that clear? Now, if you look at a patriarchal society, in fact, in most conservative societies around the world, as I said, a woman is often treated as a disadvantaged gender, given a second class treatment, even within the household, within the family, not just in the society, but even within a household. Women are expected to perform these household chores, these gendered roles that we have defined for ourselves in our society. It gives a privilege for the male members while placing the entire burden of caregiving and taking care of the household chores on women, be it the activity of cooking food, cleaning the house, collecting water, collecting fuel, or providing care in the family, looking after children, looking after the elderly. This entire burden of caregiving and the household responsibility has been dumped on our women, not just in India, but in many countries around the world. So, this increased burden is what makes women even more vulnerable. Understood? Because women don't get paid for household work. Studies have shown that on an average, an Indian woman spends more than 8 hours in household work and they're not paid a single rupee for that, which means they're not financially independent. They are dependent on the earning members. They are dependent on the male members of the household who are earning the money. Whereas women are putting in almost the same amount of work and effort, or sometimes even more than that, because you can't really quantify household work and they're not getting paid for it. So financially, they are not secure. Financially, they're not independent. This affects their decision making role and power in the household as well. When it comes to their healthcare, their nutrition, their education, their overall welfare and well being, they can't decide for themselves because of the societal pressure, because of the patriarchal nature of the society and the expectations, the so called family expectations. Women are bound by the decision of the male members of the household or the so called elders in the household. So this affects not just a girl child, it affects adult women as well. It affects even women who are elderly, who are senior citizens. So that is something you need to pay attention to. Studies have shown that over 50% of pregnant women in the country are anemic. This is primarily due to malnutrition. Right from birth, a girl child faces numerous difficulties and discrimination in our society. In a society where female feticide and infanticide is still practiced, child marriage is still practiced, a girl child never gets equal protection and equal opportunity. This is only going to get further aggravated because of climate change. Now, to understand how this could happen, how women could face more abuse, because studies have shown a direct causal relationship, a correlation that exists between increasing global temperatures and increasing cases of domestic violence against women. Is that clear? So let's see how this can happen by taking an example. Here I'm using an image of an average Indian rural household family, a distressed family which is affected by climate change. Now, see, because of climate change, because of rising temperatures and changing weather systems and climate patterns, we will witness more droughts, correct? We might witness forest fires, we might witness floods, we might witness a drop in agricultural productivity. So, what will happen because of this? Because of these disasters, because of the failure of agriculture, the average Indian rural household or even households in the urban areas will get affected. Their income levels will drop. Their survivability comes under question. Their access to food, their access to education, their access to healthcare becomes difficult as these families get pushed into poverty. Eventually, such families might abandon agriculture, they might migrate. It could lead to distress migration. It could lead to distress migration. And when there is such distress migration, the entire burden of taking care of the household will be on the women of the household. Let's say in such a situation, the family, whatever money it is left with, will obviously prioritize the education of the boy child, given the patriarchal influence on the family. The girl child might be taken out of the schooling system. The girl child would be expected to do the household work, to assist her mother, maybe in the household chores of collecting water, collecting firewood, helping in agricultural activities, or cooking food and cleaning the house. Whereas the boy child might get priority and preference in terms of education. Same goes for nutrition and healthcare. Better healthcare and nutrition would be made available to the boy child to the disadvantage of the girl child. So, right from an infant, a girl child will face such discrimination, and this will continue to till the elderly age. The adult woman in the household, the mother, could also suffer as well due to poor nutrition, poor healthcare, lack of financial independence, lack of decision making power in the family. As the male member will start taking the decisions, the elderly will start imposing their societal norms and views on the women of the household. This could even lead to neglect of geriatric healthcare, senior citizen healthcare, where the elderly women could be neglected. So, either ways, in a climate change driven world, women will be at the receiving end, from an unborn girl child to an infant to a teenage girl to an adult woman to an elderly woman. They would be disadvantaged in a climate change driven society. From education to politics to economy, securing jobs to having access to good education, healthcare, nutrition, everything will get compromised, leaving women at a weaker position. That is why experts believe that climate change is going to have a disproportionate impact. In fact, it is already having a disproportionate impact on women. So that is why the writer is urging the government to provide a gendered perspective to climate change. That is the simple point the writer is trying to raise. When we make our climate action plans at the national level, at the state level, at the grassroots level, the writer is urging the government to pay attention to the disproportionate impact on women and incorporate special provisions for women, be it in education or nutrition, be it in healthcare, be it protecting the reproductive rights of women, right? Because economic distress could increase social evils as well. It could lead to further increase in child marriage. It could lead to further subjugation of women within the institution of marriage. It could subject them to more domestic violence and even sexual violence. It could compromise their reproductive rights. So, to protect women, we need to inculcate this into our policies, our plans focused on climate action, give special preference and priority, and involve women in the decision making process and in the implementation process. For example, we need to include rural indigenous women in the decision making process and implementation of climate action program, because rural women, especially from indigenous communities, tribal communities, forest dwelling communities, they have traditional knowledge, be it preserving climate resilient seeds or be it in helping local communities adapt to the changes that could happen in the environment. Women are well versed with such traditional knowledge. In fact, today in India, we have women led collectives, women led organizations which provide assistance during disasters. There are areas where women led collectives are first responders during disasters, such as a forest fire or a flood, which affects the agriculture in that area. Women have traditionally played a role in conserving and protecting ecosystems, from protecting forests to protecting agricultural land. Women have played a critical role. So it's essential to include them in the process of adaptation and mitigation. So when we come out with our plans, climate action plans for adaptation and mitigation, it's critical to allow women to play that vital role, to give them an opportunity to be decision makers, to play a part in the implementation of these programs and plans, and pay special attention and priority and provide special allocation. It requires additional funds to be allocated as well. That is exactly what the writer is demanding through this article. That's why I said it's a very interesting, insightful article. You can actually have this argument in an essay topic as well, in a related essay topic. So please take this question seriously. Based on what we have discussed, try to write an answer. Trust me, it can be very, very helpful for your exams. Now, coming to the next topic. As I said, there are 4 to 5 articles today related to tariff wars, trade deals, etc. So I'm going to club all of them into one comprehensive discussion. So let's take a quick look at these articles on page 1, 12, and 13. In this article, it's been reported that China has retaliated against United States with 125% tariffs, as the US has levied 145% tariffs against the US. Now, see, this has almost turned into a joke. It's as if two kids are fighting against each other. They're resorting to a tit for tat. You often see children doing this. One kid beats up the other, slaps the other child, and the other child retaliates. That is exactly what Donald Trump has unleashed: absolute chaos in the global economy. The two largest economies are locked in a trade war, which could have deadly, unimaginable consequences for the world. With 125 and 145% tariffs, practically trade between US and China can come to a grinding halt. If the massive trade between US and China stops, it is going to destroy the global supply chain. It's going to leave behind a domino effect, which is going to consume and affect every country in the world. That is why the markets are crashing, investors are losing confidence, and there is an expectation of a possible great recession in the coming months. Now, where will this stop? Why is Donald Trump insisting on this tariff war, retaliating against China by imposing these so called reciprocal tariffs? See, the US under President Trump is adopting the maximum pressure strategy. Trump wants to extract a better deal for the US to protect American interests because his campaign goal has always been to make America great again, to revive American jobs, to bring back manufacturing into the US. While this is accepted, obviously any leader of a country would try to build the manufacturing base of their own country, create jobs for their own citizens. There's nothing wrong with that. But such retaliatory policies with no economic logic and sense is simply going to hurt everyone without achieving the end objective. Resorting to such tariffs is no guarantee that companies will bring manufacturing back into the US. US neither has the skills nor the resources nor the cheap labor which is needed to produce the raw materials and components which are needed for various goods and products. Asian economies, developing economies like China, India, Vietnam, these are the countries which can produce such components and raw materials at a cheaper cost because they have the right skills, they have the right base for it. They have cheap labor which is available as well. Countries like Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, the developed economies, even the European economies as well, they are able to produce certain goods which the US cannot. And it is based, the global economy is based on this delicate balance. That is the very essence of a globalized economy. And Trump is trying to disrupt that. Essentially, he is taking an axe, trying to cut off the vital supply chains that's holding the world together in the hope that somehow it will protect American interests. Now, China, which has been forced to respond, it has retaliated because obviously in diplomacy, in trade, it's always tit for tat. It's always reciprocity. You get what you give. So if Trump is levying high tariffs to essentially deny Chinese exports into the US, obviously China will be forced to retaliate. So China has raised its tariffs as well, and this could very well turn into the biggest joke of world economic history because any further hike in tariff makes no sense. As I said, at this rate of tariffs, trade cannot happen. Trade cannot sustain between US and China. Right? American importers will no longer be able to import Chinese products. And vice versa. Chinese importers will no longer be able to import American products at this rate of tariffs. That's why I said, if this continues, because this has taken immediate effect, this could actually bring the global economy to a grinding halt, something like what the pandemic did. And this is going to be a massive setback for the global economy. But China has shown some sensibility. It has said it is willing to talk, it's willing to negotiate. But Trump wants China to make concessions. Trump does have a valid point, to be fair to Trump and to the US. China is known to resort to unfair practices, like devaluing its currency or giving unfair subsidies and support to its manufacturers so that they can dominate the global economy. Then leveraging its economic advantage for geopolitical and strategic gains. China is known for such practices, which is not entirely fair. China is not very transparent in its pricing. China doesn't give market access to other companies, other foreign products, whereas it wants its companies to dominate the world. This is a complaint India also has against China. That China doesn't provide market access to our companies. It tries to flood cheap imports into our country to destroy our domestic manufacturing. This is something that China has to address, and US actually has a valid point here. But China at least has shown the willingness to talk. Right now, Trump has said no negotiations can happen. There'll be no pause on tariffs unless and until China backs down and China accepts America's terms and conditions. See, right now, Trump has paused the tariffs on all countries except for China. On April 2nd, he labeled April 2nd as Liberation Day for United States as he levied tariffs on almost every country, including India. He levied almost 26% tariffs on India and similar tariffs on other countries. But following the reach out from other countries, be it Europe, be it Japan, be it India, they all reached out to the US urging for a negotiation and a trade deal which Trump essentially wanted. So Trump is using tariffs as a tactic, as a maximum pressure tactic to beat up other countries, force them to agree for a trade arrangement where US can benefit from the deal, essentially. So most countries have shown the willingness. That's why Trump has paused the tariffs for 90 days, giving a reprieve to them so that negotiations can happen and a trade deal can be worked out. But the tariffs have not been paused for China. In fact, Trump has almost more than doubled the tariffs and China has retaliated as well. Now, where does this leave the world? What do other leaders think? On page 12, we have an interview with Italian Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister who's on a visit to India. So let's see what he thinks about the tariff war. This Italian leader, the Foreign Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, is very clear that Trump's policies might be looking to protect American interests, but it is disrupting the global world order and economic stability. Because global economy requires stable, predictable policies. Chaos is going to ruin the stability in the global economic order. So, this Italian leader has clearly pointed out that trade wars will not benefit anyone. Trade wars are going to hurt every country, including the US itself, which the Trump administration doesn't realize as of now because of the short sightedness with which the administration is running these policies. But however, he's very hopeful that US and European Union will be able to strike a deal to address their trade differences. Since Trump has paused the tariffs for 90 days, the Italian Deputy Prime Minister is confident that US will be able to work out a trade deal with the EU because this transatlantic relationship is one of the most critical trade relationships. US and EU have a multi-trillion dollar trade relationship, which is the very foundation of the global economy. So Trump's tariffs threatens to disrupt this critical trade relationship. So all European countries and leaders are worried. So they have shown a concession. They've reached out, though they threatened with reciprocal retaliatory tariffs. They've actually taken a step back and offered reconciliation and shown a willingness to talk to the US. So US and Europe are confident that they'll be able to strike a trade deal, and that is what we take away from the statement of Italy's deputy PM and foreign minister. Then the leader of Italy has also spoken about India-EU relations, the trade relations in particular, which is very crucial in this context. Because see, India is pursuing three critical trade deals as of now. This has been mentioned by India's foreign minister as well, Dr. S. Jaishankar. Because Trump's tariffs targeted India as well, with up to 26% and above tariffs. But of course, the tariffs have been paused for India as well, as of now. India has been spared, and India US have begun talks for a bilateral trade arrangement so that we can secure a trade deal. But however, the minimum 10% baseline tariff will apply on India and every other country. Trump's administration has levied a minimum 10% baseline tariff on every country, though they have halted and paused the higher tariffs. So India has a window right now, a window in which we have to quickly negotiate and work out a trade deal because Indian exports to the US is critical. India has a trade surplus with the US. That's one reason why Trump has often called India as a tariff abuser. But this is an opportunity, and India's foreign minister also believes that the tariff wars right now might create a right opportunity for us to strike the trade agreements which we have been pursuing from many years with three big economies. Which are these three? United States, United Kingdom, and the European Union. India's foreign minister has said the trade agreements with these three will have the highest impact and greatest potential to protect Indian economic interests from the ongoing tariff wars. That is exactly what Italy's foreign minister and deputy PM has also spoken about. He has highlighted the need for the quick completion of the broad based trade and investment agreement BTIA, which India and EU have been negotiating since 2007. It's been almost 17, 18 years since India EU started the free trade negotiations, but we have never been able to finalize it because of the differences between India and EU. Don't forget, India is a developing country with different priorities. European Union represents developed nations with a different set of priorities. So the EU insists on certain conditions. They want very strict sanitary, hygiene, and phytosanitary standards, which can't be matched by Indian agriculture and by Indian pharmaceutical industry. They expect a very high standards of intellectual property rights, strict enforcement of IP laws, which is not possible for a developing nation like India. They expect very high standards in terms of environment, labor laws, and competition related laws as well, which can't be done by a country like India. So, this difference between a developing country and the developed region is what is preventing both sides from working out the BTIA. But Italy's deputy PM is confident that this year India EU are going to finalize the trade agreement and bring this into action. Recently, the president of the EU, of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, visited India, and both leaders of India and EU have committed that by 2025, by end of 2025, we are going to finalize BTIA, the broad-based trade and investment agreement, which is crucial for India-EU trade relations. Parallelly, we have fast-tracked the trade negotiations with United Kingdom as well. And now we have a trade negotiation which has begun with the United States. So Indian leaders like Foreign Minister Jaishankar and even Piyush Goyal, they strongly believe that India has an opportunity right now to fast track these trade deals, strike these big trade agreements by end of 2025 so that our economic interests can be protected, our exports to these critical markets can be protected. The EU is a big export market for us. The US is a big export market for us. So in this context, the proposed IMEC project is also crucial. This topic also came up for discussion with the Italian foreign minister and deputy PM because India, Italy both are part of the proposed IMEC, the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor that was announced at the 2023 G20 summit. But this project will not take off unless and until the crisis in Middle East is resolved, unless and until the Gaza war ends and Israel has peaceful ties with its neighbors. The IMEC cannot be realized. But Italy is hopeful and confident that in the future, IMEC has great potential. It can link India with Middle East and Europe. And Italy has offered a strategic port as part of this project, the port of Trieste. This Italian port, which faces the Adriatic Sea, has been offered by Italy to be linked with the IMEC corridor. And Italy hopes that this will establish a cotton road. It will revive the ancient cotton road and the ancient golden road linking India with Europe through West Asia, through Middle East region. So from a prelims point of view, I think the port of Trieste can be very, very important. Please note down the location. It's an Italian port located in the Adriatic Sea. And Italy wants the Trieste port to be part of the IMEC corridor, which has been proposed. The IMEC seeks to link Indian ports with the ports of UAE, in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, etc., with the road and rail network in Saudi Arabia to be linked with Jordan and then Israel's Haifa port, the strategic Haifa port of Israel, through which a sea route can be established through the Mediterranean to link with the Piraeus port in Greece, ancient Piraeus port, which had ancient trade links with India, along with the Trieste port in Italy, from where the trade network can be taken across Europe to France, to Germany, and other countries, which are also part of the IMEC corridor. So, this is what Italy is hoping. Now, there are two more related articles. There's an article based on what India's Commerce and Industry Minister has said about the trade war and the trade deals. So, let's take a quick look and then we'll come to the prelim section. Piyush Goyal has said that China is to be primarily blamed for the tariff wars. Though it is United States which started the tariff war, though the entire world is blaming Donald Trump for the instability in the global economy, Piyush Goyal has chosen to blame China for it. Why? There is a valid reason. As I said, China is known for unfair trade practices and predatory trade practices. This is exactly the problem Trump and the United States have with China. As I said, China provides a lot of hidden subsidies to its farmers, to its industries. That's how China is able to mass produce at scale. China's pricing is very opaque. It deliberately devalues its currency to gain a competitive edge in its exports. It has enabled its companies, homegrown companies, to gain global dominance. China controls most of the critical supply chains and raw material supply chains. So that is how China gains an economic advantage and it tries to leverage the advantage it has to gain geostrategic advantages as well. It actually manipulates the tariffs It blocks its own market for foreign players while exploiting the markets in other countries. Though it has been able to attract investments and set up a strong manufacturing base, it doesn't really give market access for foreign products and goods, whereas it tries to flood cheap imports into other countries. So that is exactly the complaint India also has. Indian companies have been denied market access into China, while China dumps its cheap imports and floods our market, which can destroy our domestic industry. China is known for these predatory trading practices and tariff practices, which threatens our domestic industry. Right? That's why India levies anti-dumping duties to shield and protect our domestic industry from the cheap Chinese imports. So this is something that we have always complained against China because we have a huge trade deficit with China, a trade deficit which is more than $100 billion. So Piyush Goyal has blamed China, and China, the problem is it labels itself as a developing nation. It tries to get the benefits of a developing country in trade, though it's not technically a developing nation anymore. Piyush Goyal has correctly pointed out, with a per capita income of 50,000 to $1 lakh, how can China be labeling itself as a developing nation and taking the undue advantage of the trade benefits of a developing country when it actually falls into the bracket of a highly developed nation? So that is the complaint that India has raised. And India is hopeful that with US, EU, and UK, we will be able to strike these trade deals, the big three trade agreements, which will shield and protect Indian interests. Because, as I said, the US is a critical market. Our trade relationship is more than $100 billion. US is one of India's largest trading partner, usually in the top two. China, US are the top two trading partners of India. Some years, China is the number one trading partner. Some years, US is the biggest trading partner. The EU is also in the top list. So if you look at the trade relationship between India and US, we export around $77 billion worth of goods into US, making it a critical market for Indian exports. Many Indian industries in the MSME sector, in agriculture, are dependent on the American market. Millions of Indian jobs are dependent on the American market. India also imports around $42 billion worth of goods from the US, leaving behind a trade deficit of 35 billion, which is in favor of India. So India has a big trade surplus against the US. So that has been Trump's complaint. Now, India hopes to resolve these issues with the ongoing trade talks. And hopefully, by middle of this year, we should be able to strike a deal. As of now, Trump has paused the tariffs against India and continues only a 10% baseline tariff. But if we don't work out the deal, it could again lead to uncertainty and it could severely affect Indian exports. So these are the key takeaways from today's articles related to tariff wars and trade deals. Now we come to the prelim section so that we can quickly wrap up the discussion and end the session for today. On the front page, there's a small article related to the Index of Industrial Production, IIP, which has been published. The data from the month of February has raised concern with regard to India's industrial activity. This index is a measure of industrial activity in the country, in all the sectors, in agriculture, manufacturing, and services. The data shows that industrial output growth has decelerated to 2.9%. This is one of the slowest rates of industrial growth in India in the last 6 months. Just look at the graph. Look at the graph over here. How India's industrial output has remained at a low level. It has dropped quite significantly. This slowdown in industrial growth and industrial activity is indeed a matter for concern. So, from a prelims point of view, IIP can be important. It is a key indicator for economic development in the country to track the trends in the industry, to understand the extent of industrial production which is happening. It's a short term indicator. It provides a monthly outlook. It is published by the Central Statistical Organization of the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, and it uses 2011-12 as a base year for comparison of the data. Understood? So this is the breakup of IIP index. Majority of the weightage is for manufacturing, rest for mining and electricity. Then these are the core industries, the 8 core industries which are part of the IIP: coal, crude oil, natural gas, refinery products, fertilizer, steel, cement, electricity. So please know these basic details about IIP. Next, with regard to defense, there has been a big announcement by DRDO. The Defense Research and Development Organization has announced the successful trial of India's first long range glide bomb, which has been named as Gaurav. Gaurav is an indigenous long range glide bomb which provides a unique advantage to the Indian Air Force. It has been tested repeatedly over the last few days using the Sukhoi 30 fighter jets. The long range glide bomb was deployed using the Sukhoi 30 fighter jets. Following the successful trial, the path has been paved for inducting the Gaurav long range glide bombs into the Indian Air Force eventually. Now, why are these long range glide bombs important? They actually serve a strategic and a tactical purpose in war, especially when your traditional aircraft defenses, your traditional missiles, when they can't reach intended targets, especially hardened underground targets. That is where long range glide bombs play a critical role. These bombs, when they are deployed through an aircraft, through a fighter jet like the Sukhoi 30, they can glide, they can be maneuvered in flight easily. Thus, you can try and avoid or evade radar detection from the enemy, slowly glide them, maneuver them towards the target, and they can be very, very effective in destroying reinforced buildings, underground bunkers, and hardened structures. So, missile facilities, military bases, other military strategic installations can be targeted. Underground installations can be hit by using such heavy long range glide bombs. US, Russia, China, they have a huge arsenal of such bombs. Now, India has also managed to develop an indigenous long range glide bomb with a range of a sufficient range which can carry 1,000 kilogram payload. And this is going to be inducted into the Indian Air Force. Coming to the last article, it's again related to US and Donald Trump. See, Trump will not go out of news anytime soon. So Trump knows how to make news and he has threatened Mexico with more tariffs and sanctions over a water dispute. This is not related to the trade dispute, this is related to the water dispute between US and Mexico. So, as two neighboring countries in North America, obviously US and Mexico, they share a border, they share some physical geographical resources. They share a critical river, the Rio Grande, which you can see in the map over here. The Rio Grande is critical for Mexico and critical for United States as well, especially in the southern parts towards Texas and other southern parts of the US. In 1944, US and Mexico signed a water sharing treaty. Under the treaty, US shares the waters of the Colorado River with Mexico, and in return, Mexico is supposed to share the waters of the Rio Grande with the United States, which is crucial for the water requirement in Texas and other southern provinces of the US. Now, Trump has alleged that Mexico is not upholding the terms of this agreement. Over the last few years, Mexico has not been releasing sufficient water from the Rio Grande River, which is seen as a violation of the 1944 treaty by the United States. So Trump has threatened Mexico with tariffs and maybe even sanctions if the water treaty is not followed strictly. Please remember the terms of the treaty. Under this 1944 treaty, US releases water from the Colorado River to Mexico in return for water from Rio Grande from Mexico to the US. Is that clear? So on this note, I would like to end the discussion for today. I hope it's been a useful session. And if you benefited from the class, do let me know through your likes and comments. Share the video with other aspirants as well. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.